cool. Well, if there is one man in long drive who needs no introduction, it certainly is Jason Golfzilla Zuback. So thanks so much for doing this. It's great to be talking with you here.
Oh, great to be on, Steve. It's a pleasure and an honor, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to come on today.
Well, absolutely. Thank you. So I want to get into your background and everything, but first, let me ask you about what you're seeing recently in golf. So certainly in pro long drive, PGA Tour golf, Bryson has been stirring up the pot quite a bit as he's been just accelerating his speed like nobody else. So what do you see kind of today, the role of distance in professional golf and how that, is kind of playing out?
Definitely. It's a huge factor in today's game. There seems to be, if we look at, world golf ranking, money earned, a lot of the, position of the player and such, there's often a very good correlation to how far the player hits the golf ball. So the distance the player's hitting it, it's almost a disproportional benefit. And I think, with Bryson and, his methodology where he, attacked the distance game, he saw a position to exploit as far as if he could hit it farther. He can get a disproportionate advantage, as opposed to, perhaps getting, a little more accurate on, certain, certain yardages or, putting and such. But I think he saw a reasonable plan of attack and a significant benefit of that plan of attack to hit the golf ball farther. And, we see it across, most of, professional golf, amateur golf and such, where we see a huge advantage if the player possesses the ability to hit it farther. And, we've seen the proof in the pudding with Bryson winning the US Open, a number of wins. And, he's been the poster boy for, distance on the PGA Tour, but we see other players going down that road as well. Dylan Fratelli, there's countless ones that, Charlie Hoffman, guys that have pursued this distance, and it does produce an advantage. And, I think it's a significant tool to have in the toolbox to elevate performance and money earned, world golf ranking and such.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of cool to see how it is all happening. It seems like at an increased rate nowadays. Maybe the equipment is playing a role, maybe just the general awareness and a lot of the scientific, really the breakdown. And we can get into, you mentioned you have some studies that have been done. I'd love to get into that a little bit later, but it definitely is cool to see that happening. Now, why do you think, not to, get into the negative stuff, but why do you think people kind of like freaked out when they saw, Bryson put on like 30 pounds of muscle and he's really going crazy after this distance, when obviously it is helping his game? Why do you think that they were surprised by that? Where on the other hand, if somebody said, I'm going to really dedicate 6 hours a day to getting better at putting, I'm going to get better at chipping, nobody would care. That's normal. But for the distance, people kind of were taken aback.
Yeah. I think, the body transformation, the way Bryson did it, it's quite specific for him, and it would be for any person, whether it be a long drive professional, just a average player, PGA Tour player. We'd want to, if we saw this distance to go after that as a particular a benefit, that we would have to first find out what areas where we can attack the distance. When we look at it at TPI, the Titleist Performance Institute, where we do a lot of research. And myself, I've been one of the clinical instructors and a contributor to the overall one of the advisory board members. When we look at distance, the three simple vectors of distance improvement would be, number one, the engine. The body. What can we do with the body to produce more force, create more speed? Hence translating to club head speed. And the second vector being, what can we do in our swing to tap into some extra miles an hour club head speed? There's particular things we can do to increase perhaps ground reaction force, sequencing, timing, a whole myriad of things that we can do to influence potential improvements in club head speed. And the third one is equipment. Obviously, we want to maximize equipment. Obviously, we want to hit it straight as well, but we want to maximize equipment and allow us to have the best possible possible distance from, the hard work we put in generating club head speed, or in general, that's kind of the easy button where we can get, when we partner up everything, maximum club head speed, maximum ball speed coming off the face, launch angle, spin rate, obviously within the context of keeping it straight and be able to produce the shots that we want to produce, but equipment being very important as well. Where we saw Bryson, he went down that physical route, and, with his training and such, he's quite intelligent. His team is good. And he went down a specific road, and with him, increase muscle mass, increase potential to impart force to the golf club. So, people see that and they're like, oh, he's bulking up, he extreme diet, extreme protein intake, but those things sort of go hand in hand to, get that performance advantage and also reap the benefits of his extensive physical training. I think, people see that and, they kind of have a negative connotation of guys getting bigger and more muscular, perhaps a preconceived notion from years past where, golfers shouldn't be big, shouldn't be muscular. It's more relying on timing and flexibility. But as we know, increased capacity for force production is a good thing in any sport. And then, just with him going down the distance route, a lot of people were negative against that, saying, that why do that and such, but the smart guy saw an area to exploit that would improve his performance on the golf course. And I think, preconceived notions and, just the balance of, people that have an opinion one way or the other, they don't like distance. They don't like the progression of distance. And there's that whole camp that, want to repeal that. Mm-hmm. But, Bryson's seeing the advantage of that. And then, the gym stuff, again, people see a negative connotation to that. So, but, it worked and he was able to, perform extremely well and also, have a significant distance improvement.
Mm-hmm. It's cool to see as the game of golf and long drive certainly as well is growing and is reaching new demographics, that we're getting more athletes in the sport. So it's that old, like he putts good for a big guy. I think that was like a common saying always. Like that's just not true anymore. You're getting great athletes in the game where they can hit it a mile, but then they can also putt like anybody else. And that's really cool to see, especially as, growing the game and really getting all groups of people in is an important thing. And it's fantastic to see that.
Oh, definitely. It's, especially in long drive, we see, and it's always sort of been like that where we'd have this influx of guys that came from other sports, whether it be baseball, the pitchers and power hitters, obviously with those physical attributes to create big club head speed. And then guys coming from the track world, the guys that threw the javelin, throw the hammer, the discus, the shot, guys that come from a sprinting background, guys who come from a hockey background. So we see these, exceptional athletes coming from other sports that get into long drive. Just the nature of it is extremely enjoyable and fun to do, but it lends itself to the things that they've done in their sports, big speed, big force, big power, and ultimately hitting the golf ball far, where they've, kind of gravitated to in a sport that is fun to do. So, but and golf's the same as well. A lot more players that are taking up golf that perhaps would have chose a different route, whether it be a baseball route, a hockey route, maybe a track route, wherever, but they're getting into golf because, it's a great sport and, there is the potential to create a living playing the game.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned fun, and golf certainly is fun. I love playing golf, tournament golf, recreational, whatever. But in long drive, I remember some of the first experiences I ever had was that I was thinking, both how fun the actual sport and competition is, but how fun the people are as well. And it kind of struck me immediately where a lot of the long drive guys don't have the same kind of like puffy chested ego as tournament golfers. Now they do have some ego for sure, but it's a little bit different where it's like, yeah, I'm going to try to go destroy you when we're up on the tee box, but we can be buddies afterwards. And in tournament golf, it's a little bit more kind of like I'm going to keep my distance. I think that's one of the cool things about long drive is that it is inviting. It welcomes people in right away. I know from day one basis, I had people like Landon Gentry, Mitch and Mike Dobbin. They've always been incredibly nice to me, you know, coming to say hi, even if they didn't know me. And it's a really nice sport.
Oh, definitely. And it's kind of been like that, you know, from when I started back in the mid 90s, where, you know, it's this, you know, there's obviously some personality conflicts here and there, just like with life and any sport in general. But I would agree. It's, you know, no one wants to admit that, you know, somebody could hit it by them, right? And whether it be on the course and especially a long drive, but, you know, you compete really hard on the tee, but then when you're off the tee, you can have that, you know, that friendship with the guys. It just that, you know, the guys, when you start to do it and enjoy it, you know, it creates that bond, right? Because it's kind of a unique sport and such. And usually anybody that comes and tries it, you know, kind of falls in love with it. And whether it be, you know, in any division, the senior division, the ladies division, the men's open division, whichever division, but people will love it. And, you know, it's kind of that, it's almost like the Top Golf of, you know, sort of golf where, you know, it's this fun atmosphere. You know, the guys are, you know, going hard at it, but, you know, after you know, you can sit down and have a meal or beer with somebody and, you know, there's no hard feelings. If they beat you on the tee, you just try to get them next time. Right.
Yeah, that's right. So let's get into your background. It's cool to be talking with you here because I met you once in 2015. I think the day you won the senior championship. But you're the first guy that I ever saw in long drive. So back, I think probably when I was in high school or something, I'd see a magazine with you, or I'd see like a probably on Golf Channel, something about what you did. And I didn't know anything about long drive at the time, but then I just saw this jack dude coming up with a unique swing and hitting the ball, you know, further than I knew it could be hit. And it was just so cool to see something like that. So kind of, you know, fill us in there. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff, but obviously 5 world championships, a senior world champ, like a lot of stuff. So how did you get started?
You know, way back when I first got into it, there wasn't much exposure. You know, today, you know, and the PLDA, I just want to, you know, take my hat off to the guys, you know, Bobby and the whole team, and Robbie, and, you know, and Ryan and Landon, and the whole group of guys that have, you know, had the vision to bring long drive back and create a venue where people could compete and have fun out there, and there's money on the line and the exposure to the sport. So, you know, I really want to thank the PLDA for giving opportunity to bring the sport back. And it you know, it wasn't like they just walked into something, you know, that was already going with the Golf Channel pulling away and sort of just dropping the sport altogether. It sort of needed to get started from scratch. And, you know, it's not easy. You know, guys think, oh, you paint some lines on the grid and you go hold a contest. But, you know, I think, you know, as guys compete more and such, or even realize all the work that goes into putting the event on, and, you know, all the subtleties of it, you know, the live scoring, the TrackMan, the, you know, the guys contributing, Bobby, and, you know, the variety of guests that are on the YouTube broadcast. And you know, just going through as a competitor, you compete, but, you know, once you step back and you take a look how much work this actually is, and just my hat's off to those guys to create the venue. When I first started, there wasn't a lot of exposure to it. I remember watching it on TV on occasion, and, you know, seeing the sport, and I thought, yeah, that'd be kind of cool to get into. And I'd always hit it really far. I'm a multi-sport background. I played hockey, multiple racket sports like tennis and badminton and squash and racquetball. Played football, played baseball, played soccer, and, you know, obviously golf, and, you know, kind of everything came together. You know, and I always hit the ball far, and I always desired to hit it far. That was kind of, you know, my thing, where, you know, I'd rather, you know, kind of hit it 350 off the tee, and then, you know, maybe not play so good, but I enjoyed pounding it just like any log driver. Right.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
But going down that road, and yeah, it was interesting. I used to play at quite a high level as a junior, and then through the amateur ranks. And I was playing in one of the Canadian Tour qualifiers, and one fellow said, "Hey, you should give this long drive stuff a try. I think, you know, you hit it really far. I think you hit it straight. You can do well in it." Then the first time I went to the World Championship in 1996, I won the whole thing. So my first time time there, won the whole thing. Came back the next year. People said, oh, this Canadian guy, he got lucky the first time, won again, hit it over 400 every round. In 1997, 1998, won again, 99. So 4 in a row, lost by a yard in 2000 to make it 5 in a row. Then on my 10th anniversary, won my 5th title in the open division. And then I think my, kind of 19th, 20th anniversary, I won the senior division or the over 45 division for the first time. And, that it was pretty, a lot of success early on, and kind of maintain that. But it's a long history. I think in my 20 years of competition in the open division, 19 top 25s, 14 top 12s, 12 top 10s, 10 final 8s. Wow. So, just going down, like I had a lot of success, and I kind of was there, but, it's not easy to win these things. And, Kyle makes it look easy winning these events and such, but as and I know, it's not easy to win. And there's so much competition, and, now, with the quality of guys coming out, there's big ball speed all over the place. Right. And you have to, you have to be on your game to do well at the tournaments.
Yeah, for sure. And for people who have never competed in long drive or maybe aren't too familiar with the format, in order to do what you just mentioned, not only to win that many years in a row, but to have that many top 10s and that many, all that requires such consistency that to ever think of like you or a long driver as not like a consistent driver of the golf ball would be so inaccurate, because that you have to be, even on your bad days, you've got to be doing well to advance that far, that many times. That's almost as impressive, really, as all the wins.
Well, and back then we had a different format. I quite like today's format where we have the round robin type format where it's just not like you hit 2 rounds and you go home, like as what happened in the past. Like at the World Championship for a number of years, it was, they called it double elimination, but it truly wasn't. It was double elimination the first day. So if you ever had 2 losses in a group, you went home. But even if you didn't have any losses, you made it to the second day. If you only had 1 loss, then you still went home. So it was tough. Like you had to hit it really straight. You couldn't lose a group. You had to keep advancing out of there. So it's a lot of pressure, and different format. And then once we got to the final, there was 8 guys that hit in a row, and the longest won. And then we had the match play, and I was I believe the first to win at both those formats. But as now we have the match play where, once we get to the final 8, then or once we get to the match play format, which, is quite interesting when we go head to head. But I like the round robin and the point system where, it gives you a chance that where it's just not 1 round, or if you have 1 round or 2 bad rounds, you could still make up for it and still compete and have a good chance to advance to the through the brackets to the the round of 16 and the round of 8 and so on and so on. But it was tough, and there was a lot of consistency. There was a high degree of hitting it in play. Well, I shouldn't say for everybody, but the advantage to hitting it in play was huge. Obviously, the more balls we hit in play, and just like today as well, the more balls you hit in play, you can get some to roll out and such. So
let's take a little bit of a turn here. I want to get back to your background because there's a lot more questions I have. But in terms of formats, I've studied fairly closely the different format options, and I agree the round robin is a definite improvement over the double elimination, or certainly over a shootout for a large field size. But I think the actual point breakdown, the point values are not quite right. So my proposal would be to probably change it so it's, instead of right now it's 200, 150, 25, and OB is 0, of course. It would be 300, 200, 100, 50. That way it's a little bit tighter of a spread. You don't get rewarded quite as much for a win, because when you get rewarded that much for a win, you're actually kind of losing ground to come into second. There have been a lot of times people have had like 4 seconds or maybe even 5 seconds and not made it through. And that seems kind of sketchy. Have you considered that at all?
Yeah, I do think there's a little bit of that disproportionate weighting on the top end. Just because, when you could have somebody that goes, OB in 2 rounds and still get through. You know what I mean? Like it puts this. And if
there was actually a guy in I think it was a 2019 World Championship. He went OB, and he's a great guy. I love him. He went OB 3 times and then went win, and he advanced.
Right. Yeah.
That's pretty cool because he hits it far, but maybe the point values are a little bit off if you can do that.
Right. I do like the 0 for the OB because it's going to penalize you but I would agree that, there could be some tweaking to the point values where it still rewards you for winning the set, but not so much, right? Like to give you double the points of the second guy. And, if we look at how it sort of shakes out, usually like if you got 5 seconds, you're going to get through on 500 points in in the 5 round side. Right. And, if a guy won, 2 and finished second once, then hit 2 sets OB, he still gets through as well. Cause usually that you kind of 450 is that sort of bubble mark. Right. But, yeah, I would agree. I do like the point system better, no matter how you slice it. It's a lot of work though for you guys, the hitters, in that there's a lot of hitting, between, there's, 4 or 5 rounds that first, in the first round, and then, 4 or 5 rounds in the second one. And then you go to the quarter, the semi, and the final. That's a lot of hitting. And especially if you count some like cool downs and warm ups again, right? That's a lot of hitting for a day. But I mean, it sort of equalizes things if, a guy, has 1 bad set or 2 bad sets, down the road, it gives them the ability to, still perform and get, to a point in the tournament where they can be into the final. I think
it kind of goes well with the theory of why the PGA Tour may have gone away from more match play events, where if you had like some of the really top guys that drew a lot of the fans to come and watch, and then they got knocked out the first round, that's kind of a bummer. So then, going to stroke play, you're just kind of allowing the cream to rise to the top. And so in the same way here, if you just give everybody more opportunities to hit, usually you'll have the better, more consistent, longer hitter sticking around. One other option, though, would be to still do the 5 rounds, still do the round robin, but instead of assigning point values, your point value is whatever yardage you hit. Because that way you're still pretty much competing against only the people in the tee box. I know there's the whole argument of the wind can shift and it can make a huge difference for sure. I'm sure as well as anyone. But what do you think of that idea?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I haven't given that one too much thought. I guess the potential for, sort of an opportunistic wind shifts for, like if you got penalized a couple of times with wind shifts where, that can drastically affect, but that does reward consistency in the grid, right? Where, maybe if you're up against a lesser, players on the tee box, it still gives you the, a good hitter, the ability to put good balls in play and, sort of advance their cause on the total yardage accumulation.
And if you go even further down that road is what the women are going to do this year in Japan, which I think is awesome, by the way, that the World Championship is going to be there. But the rules that they take the average of your 3 best drives per set. So you've really got to focus on accuracy that way.
Right.
Have you ever done a competition like that?
Yeah, we did. Mike Dunaway, he was, kind of one of the, the forefathers of long drive. He had some great press in Golf Magazine and Golf Digest and such. And he was one of the, the big hitters of the time. He didn't compete that much, but he was more, he had this kind of notoriety of hitting it really far, and he was recognized for that. Anyway, he had done a tournament where it was 5 balls and your 2 longest. So they would average your 2 cumulative longest. So it forced you to hit a lot in play because there was less chances, the 5, and then your 2 longest cumulative yardage counted towards, you're advancing out of the group. So, I quite like that one. It puts a big impetus on, hitting it in play. Right. And, I think, there would be a lot of strategy with that one because, guys would potentially select, drivers that they could hit straighter, obviously, maybe shorter, maybe stiffer shafts and such, playing with the setups to give them the best advantage to, but yeah, like the 3 out of 6 is that's a tough one. Right now there's so much pressure on, having your biggest ball out there count, right? So, and you see it when you're competing that, the guys on the tee, they're holding nothing back because they need to win the set, right? Like no one, like some of the guys, Kyle, that have this, immense talent and immense speed, he can cruise at, like 220, 225, no big deal, but then he could step on the gas and bring it up. But, most competitors, you need to have the foot down on the gas, going as fast as possible to get the big balls out there on the interest of, getting in the, winning or second place in the set to advance yourself.
Yeah. It's always going to be kind of a give and take, like just measuring the absolute longest or the average, that'd be on the other side and trying to find a good balance. But I think we're in agreement that the round robin is a fun format for the competitor, fair format for the competitor, and then fun for the viewer as well. So.
Yeah, logistically, like if we can't, like the two, your two average, or just to do your average of your two longest, that would create some headaches for the guys doing this live scoring, right? Like there would be some time delay in there. So, there's some subtlety and nuance to it but definitely that could work. And I think probably in a, max driver length, I've always thought that, I like the 48 because it's, USGA, that's the USGA limit. And, the local rule that the PGA and LPGA invoke that, goes to the shorter length, right? The max 46, right?
Yeah.
That I always thought, to get a little more, credibility with the public, because guys that have done events like yourself and, when you're on the tee and you're smashing balls at a corporate or charity event, guys will come and measure their driver up up yours. And yours might be 2 inches or 3 inches longer. And they're like, oh, that's why you hit it so far. Right. And, right. That's why I hit it 100 yards by just because of the 3 inches.
Yeah,
but I think, I was always under the, the thought of, like a 45 and a half, plus or minus, 3% to accommodate for, butt cap and stuff. So which makes it like a 46-inch hard limit type thing. And I thought that would, lend a little more to involvement of the OEMs on the shaft side and the club side, because it's a standard club at that point. And then a little more, acceptance, I guess, with general public saying, they're hitting the same clubs as we are. Although, everybody's going to find some fault in whatever you're using, like, oh, you use a 4 degree, that's why you hit it far, whatever. Right. But
yeah, there's just disbelief for people who don't know. The first time you see somebody hit it 450 yards, it doesn't make any sense. It looks and sounds and feels so different than anything that they're used to. So the first thought is always, oh, well, that's an illegal club, an illegal ball, but have you ever seen that movie Flubber? Back in the day, like Robin Williams, he would like spray it on something and it would just bounce all around. How fun would that be to put on a ball? But that's what people kind of think that we're doing. So
right, yeah, it's got to be the club, the ball, the shaft. There's a ton of excuses.
Yeah,
it's funny. I used to, when I do my corporate events and charity and stuff, I'd always have like a driver that was similar to the one I was using. Obviously not a competition ready one that has seen it a little more work on it, right? And offer them the ability to go out and hit it, and and it wakes people up real fast that 3x shaft at the time, and 4 degree loft head. It doesn't necessarily go really far. You got to learn how to hit that, but
it usually goes like 5 feet off the ground and 30 degrees right.
Exactly, right. Yeah. And when I first started, and up until a point, there was no length limit. So, guys could use whatever length that they wanted to, and we'd see guys using 60-inch stuff and, high 50s, mid 50s. Right. Uh-huh. And it, it was kind of a, straight, that when you see a guy swinging a 60-inch club, it's strange because it takes a lot of coordination and timing to be able to hit that one. And, it was interesting because it would give guys, that weren't necessarily super fast, that probably were really strong, but not necessarily had that explosive, power that the guys hitting the shorter clubs did. But it would give them the ability to compete, with all the players. They can hit that longer club, which essentially makes it so heavy when it's at 55, 60 inches, and work on their timing and use their strength to their advantage, as where they may have not possessed that power aspect and the speed that the guys that use the shorter clubs and were able to generate the big speed with the shorter clubs. So it was quite interesting just the see the guys swinging the long stuff, and an average person trying to swing a 60-inch club. It's quite a sight.
I've never seen that, but that would be fun. I can't imagine that they would hit the ball that often, much less have it go straight.
Right. It's a tough chore, right? And especially to hit it in the center of the face. And there were some guys that were, exceptional at, swinging the long club. So, not too many of the guys, were able to swing the long club. They were able to, put the force into it to get the speed, because of that mechanical advantage of the length. But then there's a few guys that could swing the long one really fast, that, they were strong and fast. Right. And it was quite a sight. Adrian van Rensburg was one of the guys, a fellow from South Africa. He finished second to me, and it would be 1998. He gravitated towards this 60-inch, and he could swing it fast, but eventually he had some hand surgeries and such. And with that long of a club, it'll beat you up significantly as well.
All right. So let's go back. That was a deviation from the background topic. But so was 96 the first year that you ever tried long drive, or did you try it in 95? And then how did that work?
Yeah. So I had a little bit of exposure to it in 95, and, I didn't know how things worked and stuff. And, just kind of got my foot wet. And in 96, I said, hey, I'll give it a good run. Today, or in the LDA times, that you could easily find kind of the local and the district qualifiers. But back then it was tough. Like, there was no internet, and so you had to kind of figure where the local qualifiers were, and when they were, where the districts were, and try and coordinate your travel schedule. And it was a tough go. And I thought, I'll give it a good go in 1996, and I won my local by quite a bit. And then
so not to interrupt, but what were you doing at the time? Did you have long drive clubs? Did you take us through all that?
Well, I was just using quite a standard. I had a Callaway. At the time. 6.5 degree Great Big Bertha. Then there was another brand, it's called Cubic Balance. They had some lower lofted stuff. But just relatively standard length. Still, I'd seen the guys swing the longer stuff, but I didn't understand, kind of why they were swinging this longer. And I thought, I can compete with the short stuff, because I had hit it by, and with them all along, through all the tournaments so far. And then at the regional, I saw kind of all the winners from the locals make their way to the regional at that point, and you see most of the guys were using longer stuff. So I thought, maybe I'll give it a try. So I was using 44 and a half inch up until and even with the regional, I qualified through the regional just with my standard, I think 44 and a half.
Were you breaking faces at that point?
Yeah, some were going. The Callaways are pretty tough, and this Cubic Balance one was pretty tough as well. And then a fellow had this one called RL Zyder, and he was a fellow that made custom-made titanium heads. So he could make the head and they were small though at the time, like 195 cc. So along the original tailor-made burner driver. So 195 cc's, like smaller than today's 3 wood, but he could make whatever loft, face angle, weight. It was interesting. One of the guys at the competition had one of the RL Zyder drivers, and I thought, well, I do need to hit it lower, so I'll order a 4-degree. I like to look a little closed, so like just a half degree closed, and specific gram weight of the head. And then I got exposure to aftermarket shafts. At the time, Harrison was a big company, and I chose one of the Harrison shafts that I thought, is pretty heavy at the time, like 85 grams at 47 inches total length. But that's what I kind of stuck with at the World Championship, and hit it really well, and won all my rounds all the way through, won the semifinal. And I was the last hitter in the final in 96, and on my third ball ended up winning. And I was the last hitter. So, I was kind of the cleanup, and I won it out of that spot. So,
what kind of training were you doing going into the 96 World Championship?
I was working full time as a pharmacist at the time. So, a lot of the stuff I was doing was a lot of strength-based work. I had a good powerlifting background, and when I played football as well, a lot of the training back then, it was more just around strength based. There wasn't a huge amount of speed based stuff, but I sort of was naturally doing a lot of speed based, where I would do a lot of sprints. I obviously, swinging the club trying to swing the club as fast as I could. So more of, the speed training, just with the driver in itself, and then also working in badminton and tennis, some high velocity sports where I was getting, inadvertently the speed work in and doing the strength work as well. And also trying to maintain my flexibility with doing a lot of stretching as well. So everything sort of came together nicely, where, all that strength training kind of came together, that speed training, myself, putting the time in, trying to swing as hard as possible. Everything sort of came together to, produce a result where I was able to produce big club at speed and hit it, close to the center of the face, and hit it in play. And it served me well for, quite a long period of time. Technology of today and the sophistication of training and such.
How many golf balls would you hit leading up to an event, and how did that change over the years?
Yeah, I was always, kind of a big volume guy, and it's a tough one. Like, and that volume would sort of vary for, individual, like some guys can tolerate bigger volumes and some guys can tolerate not as big volumes. Right. And, it's interesting because the long drive in itself is sort of absurd, because yourself coming from a strength and conditioning and human performance background, that, if you asked, okay, we're going to create a sport that I want you to be as fast and as powerful as possible, but I want you to do it all day. Right. That's a, crazy task, right?
Yeah, like one or the other. Yeah.
Right. So, those two things are sort of on the far end of spectrum, but we need to be able to blend them both, because that's the nature of the sport, right? Like if it was, okay, it's just the fastest ball speed guy is going to win. Like we can sit down, and that volume of hitting would be way less. And, the way we would design that competition or the preparation for that competition would be way different than we do it now. But there is that, that blend of, you need the, that long-term and speed endurance, right? And those things are, at opposite ends of the spectrum. And I was able to tolerate like long, big volume hitting, back then, probably 300, 350, full impact, pretty much maximal efforts. Right. And that's what my training sort of consisted of, like a lot of hitting, and, it grew my swing, and it sort of grew me for competition as well. But I was able to endure that and maintain my speed pretty well, but it kind of varies for all the guys. And I sort of just stuck with that recipe for success through my whole career, where I did all that hitting. And even, before competitions, I remember hitting, 300, 400 balls, every day leading up to the day I competed. And, I'd hit a lot of warm-ups, I'd hit after, but, it's just kind of what I did. Thinking back, I probably could have, decrease that volume pretty good, because I had put the work in prior to, and then probably peaked a lot better, but it's just kind of what I stuck to. So I I was some big volumes, and, I remember one day I was testing at Titleist at the Oceanside testing facility. And, way back when 200 miles an hour on the stingy monitors that was a big ball speed. And, back in the day, I was the first one to exceed 200, the first one to exceed the 210. And way back in 2002, I was the first one to exceed that 220 mark in Japan. And, but this testing session at the Oceanside test facility, my first ball was over 200, and I hit all morning, and then I came back and hit in the afternoon again, 700 and some change, and my last ball was over 200 as well.
Wow.
I was beat up like that. That hurt me pretty bad, but it just kind of, that's not typical, and I was able to endure these long hitting sessions. But that's sort of the volume, probably that 300, 400 in each practice session. And perhaps I could have cut that down and made that a little better quality and preserved my body better, and also had a performance advantage. But it's kind of,
we can't be too critical with the results. It worked. So for you, it worked.
Right. It did work, but perhaps it could have been a little more strategic with this big volume.
So did you split it up into kind of seasons? Like in the off season, you would spend more time in the gym, your volume would be high there, and then that would taper down and the hitting would go up into competition?
Yeah. Typically you're kind of forced into that scenario here in Canada where, we're not able to practice all year outside, obviously. And, indoors a little tougher in certain scenarios. So, but, I would decrease that, the number of days I would hit, probably not the volume though, just the number of days where I'd have a little bit less days, but it was still pretty consistent as far as, kind of keeping the swing and keeping that volume. But yeah, it was more where I can put the time in the gym and do the things, specifically on the strength side, and I can, periodize my workouts and, create different blocks where I can focus on different elements. And, that kind of worked pretty well, where there was this off season, once the World Championship happened in October, there really wasn't anything till, kind of March, April, perhaps, because we used to have the LDA tour at the time, and where the events would go all summer and culminate at the World Championship. So, but with the amount of corporate events I did and charity events and appearances and such, it, was often tough to get the workouts in. So there was, sort of this practical increase in, or sort of slight decrease in volume in the winter, increase in the emphasis on the strength and conditioning side, and then sort of that flip in the summer where, increase a little bit in the volume of hitting, and then decrease in sort of the just the maintenance sort of side on the strength and conditioning side.
I always felt like growing up, because I grew up in Chicago and we had an off season forced on us basically with the winter, that when I would come back in the spring, and I know part of it is just growing up and getting bigger and stronger, but I always felt better after that rest period, where you're not hitting as much. I would do more time in the gym, more whatever, but I would always come back a little bit better, a little bit farther, and all that kind of thing. So there, I think, obviously, I think we could talk probably for hours about different splits and training program designs and all of that kind of stuff. But for each person, I guess you got to find kind of what works for you. And so what did you do? What kind of exercises did you do? How did you break it up in order to have that balance of strength and explosive, like the strength and power kind of thing? And what'd you do?
Right. So as I mentioned before, it was more of a traditional kind of strength and sort of hypertrophy program, and then sort of balanced with these velocity activities like sprinting and the racket sports and such. And then as I got a little more knowledgeable, a little more sophisticated with my training, then I was able to, kind of focus on the things I needed to work on. Coming from a powerlifting sort of background and a long kind of strength training background, my strength was always good. And when I had exposure to, some people that could test me in certain aspects to see, where I might be lacking, then probably the thing was that I wasn't doing enough, kind of speed and power stuff, but more focusing on, the muscle building and the strength side. So, getting exposure to exercises, the Olympic lifting was a huge one. As I sort of got more sophisticated, the benefits of the Olympic lifting and the power generation and the overall benefit to, whatever sport you're doing, if it involves moving quick or being powerful. Obviously, the Olympic lifts with the extreme power outputs are extremely important. And then, wide variety of things from, the sprinting as well, not only just with running, but also skating as well. Myself playing hockey and then rollerblading and such, but the benefit of the sprint training, some of the overload, over speed training, as well, having exposure to that sort of early on in the, kind of in the 2000s timeframe where, not only with the golf side, but also on the baseball, utilizing some of the baseball techniques with the, the overweight, and the lighter bats, the over weight, and then the lighter balls as well on the throwing side, and the benefit of that stuff. A lot of different sort of modalities, and then some of the med ball activities, the tornado ball stuff. As I got a little more sophisticated in my knowledge about different activities, I was able to still maintain the strength, but incorporate some speed and power stuff. So, absolute velocity stuff, and also that, high power output stuff. And I think that really served me, well, leading up to when I won my 5th title up in 205, I was, physically probably my best. I was strong, super fast, super powerful. I kind of had everything together, wasn't injured. And then, going beyond that, even though, I didn't win another Open championship after that, I competed really well, 2008, 2009, 2010, great ball speeds, and just, not getting it done in the final during those years, but and then winning again in 2015, but just kind of managing the injuries as well, but a little more, kind of shift to, power and speed, and with the maintenance of the strength. I guess that would be sort of the synopsis of, how my, that progression of knowledge went, and how the bias went as my career got farther down the road.
So as far as the Olympic lifting, did you ever use like a Tendo unit or any kind of bar speed measuring?
Back when I first started, there wasn't much of that, like only in the research settings in the universities and such. And I had a really good coach for a number of years, a fellow that had his Master of Sport from the USSR and that competed himself internationally, coached at the Olympics. But he was the best barometer of bar speed and such. Where he could look at you and, whatever workout, he would have a range of percentages where, for a power clean or a full clean or snatch, power snatch, whatever, he could look at you and see how fast you're moving. If your movement quality was poor, he can bias you to the potentially a lighter load. And also on the flip side, if he saw your movement quality was excellent and you're moving fast, you're strong, you were, the neuromuscular system was working at a peak level, he would bias you on the heavier side of the percentage, all within, the thought of the progression of, that the periodization that he was working with at the time. Usually we would work towards, my significant competition, which was the World Championship. So my whole training throughout the year would be biased towards World Championship, and then perhaps if there was another big international event or big tour event that we would do a peak for that as well.
Okay, I recently did some tests down at, it's called Par for Success in Raleigh. Actually, there's going to be an episode coming out soon with them. But they did a bunch of tests kind of similar to what you're talking about, and very similar to what TPI does. I know the founder of Par for Success, Chris Finn, he's worked with TPI a lot. He's written different articles and stuff. I don't know how they work together now, but the tests found that I move heavyweight really well. And I would kind of expect that. I've done a lot of powerlifting, and like I trained with the West Side guys for a while, conjugate methods, stuff like that. But then the light weights, I have not been moving those well. And it kind of makes sense because even with conjugate method, your speed dynamic days, you're moving like on a high end, like 0.9 meters per second on the bar speed.
Right.
But that's still pretty low if you look at like how fast you need to move the club head speed or club head and club as a whole. So they've helped me to tailor my training and get a little bit more specificity and try to tap into that wide base of strength that I have to get that more explosive stuff. So based on a lot of stuff you just said personally, but then also I know you work really involved with TPI. What would you suggest someone like I do in that scenario?
Right. Yeah. So obviously, individually, like we want to assess everybody because, with yourself working in that strength and conditioning world, you always get what exercises can I do to give me the most, give me the top 5. And, they think it's a cop out when you say, well, we have to pick the top 5 that's best for you with your end range goal, right? So, for one person, it might be, more of a strength-based issue. For one, it might be a speed-based issue, right? So if we just think in those terms, and also, could it be a mobility issue, not allowing our body to produce the best force to the club in this rotational movement, the golf swing, right? So, everything comes together. So we'd want to assess. So obviously we assess mobility, we assess strength, we assess power, right? And so somebody like yourself, I see that all the time where, the guys that I work with, they're moving big weight. They're double body weight squat guys. They're, triple, 2.5 times body weight deadlift, and they're 1.5 times body weight bench easy, but they're not moving the light stuff fast. And so most of the time it's, a bias of their training to that heavy stuff. Right. And, the ability to create force is huge, and strength. Like if you have a good strength base, that's massive. And most people benefit from getting stronger. But once we get to a certain strength that, when we want to produce a maximum velocity in a sport that requires maximum velocity, we need to, get to the areas that need to work on. So for a guy like yourself, I'm looking, if we look at the sources of power in golf, like we've got this, the vertical thrust source, right? Where, what we can say is, maybe knee extension or kind of squat strength and hip hinge strength, where we could just, broadly paint that, so we have this vertical thrust source. So, hey, we got a big squat, but we need to get some power. So I'd like to see some speed-based, some, light load, high velocity stuff like, box jumps, like sprinting, speed skating, broad jumps, and then also working in that, where we're adding more load. So we're working, in guys that, are used to looking at the force velocity curve, as we're that 1 rep max, that's got huge force, but the velocity is really low. As on the other side, when we have the high velocity, the force is really low. So we're kind of working in the center portion of the force velocity curve or the power section, right? Where we're adding, a load, and it sort of depends, but, things like a trap bar jump, a thing like a pull clean, pull snatch, where we're adding a load to that movement pattern to work on that power output, right? And then,
so now, do you mean like a contrast method, like do a trap bar deadlift and then jump, or you mean jump with like a moderate lightweight?
Well, it could be, a variety of kind of ways we can get at that, like say on a program design aspect where, perhaps we'll focus more on some power stuff, right? Where we're going to load that into the, first part of the program, but then we can, still maintain with some strength stuff in the latter end of the program, or we can do like a contrast, for average people and, guys that, once they have some competency in the lifts and stuff, where we can, tap into some of the physiologic benefit of where we can do a, say a slightly heavier squat, just say 85%, just a triple, 3 reps. So we're getting the motor units, activation of the motor units, but then go to a high velocity movement, like go from, that heavy squat and then right to box jumps where, we're not wearing it out. We're doing 3, maybe 4 reps, but, we're maximizing motor unit recruitment, but then we're getting to the velocity side. And then, maybe do that for a number of sets. Then we can come on the third exercise. We can work at in that power range where we can do like a pull clean, pull snatch, trap bar jump. There's a whole way we can add load to that movement pattern with the velocity. So we're working that. And then usually we like to work a reverse motor pattern as well. In that, kind of the hip extension, knee extension, that vertical ground force sort of pattern, that's knee extension, hip extension. So something reverse motor pattern where we go knee flexion, hip flexion. So something like a med ball slam, or, we can do some velocity stuff with the ski erg, just to hit that reverse motor pattern. And then if we got a little more sophisticated, we can even do some accelerated plyo stuff where we can use like a band to help us, create more velocity than we normally would to, kind of push the body into recognizing more velocity and getting to more velocity. So, but again, it's, more of that bias where we're looking at absolute velocity stuff for you and power stuff. That's where, hey, we want to maintain that strength, but we want to get to, quite often, we see guys throwing med balls, and they like throwing the heavy med balls, but even, with the baseball guys, and if we look at some of the guys that are really the forerunners in the baseball training, and with golf as well, like when we're doing sort of the power training stuff, I like to bias it slightly on the lighter side, because golf, the golf club is, like 320 grams, right? So it's not a heavy implement. We're trying to move the body as fast as possible. The power stuff, maximum power is great, but again, we want to have the context and still moving super fast. We want to move, if we're going to move a load, you want to move it as fast as possible. So even when I'm, doing the med ball rotary shot put, when we're working on rotational stuff, even the biggest strong guys like yourself, like that have huge force potential, the maximum weight I'm throwing with yourself probably would be a 6-pounder. Like I would never go to the 8 and the 10 and the 12, because you don't need to move like a heavier one slower. You need to move faster, right? So I bias that on the lighter side, and then if people that don't possess the force production capability of a guy like yourself, so I'm not gonna load them with an 8-pound ball. Like I'd want them throwing a 3 or 4 just so they can maximize their velocity, but still adding that load in there.
Well, I don't know that I would put myself in the category of the biggest and strongest, but I appreciate you doing that. Yeah. Going back to what you said, as far as doing like the counter movement, the counter loading, if you're doing in that hip extension, knee extension example, would it fall in the category of doing the counter movement to do like a depth jump where you're just handling that motion eccentrically, or are you talking you're concentrically doing the opposite motion?
Yeah, there's no hard and fast, kind of proof on this one. It's more, coming from Tom House's baseball research, where we see when we work the reverse motor pattern, that we're seeing a benefit in the primary motor pattern. So, there's a lot of, it's just like a theory of mine, and I've seen it work. It just with even swinging like super speed. There's a lot of people that say, well, the left-handed swings are just adding volume and they're of no benefit. But if we look at practical things, we see a pretty good benefit to the opposite side swing. So that would be, obviously, rotating in the opposite direction. There's a bunch of theories on why that may be a benefit, but the example I gave you with, when, for instance, if we were doing like sprinting in your program, so we do some sprinting, but then the reverse motor pattern, I'd like to see some reverse sprinting. So again, I don't know if it's a kind of a neuro recognition of that reverse motor pattern, if it's one that we see a benefit to being able to decelerate better, right? Put the brakes on quicker being more competent in the reverse pattern, whether it be, throwing a med ball, our natural direction, or on the flip side, right? So, we'd always want to do on both sides, right? So that reverse motor pattern. So it's just a theory, and I kind of like incorporating that. I think a lot with the neuro, just the learning aspect of it, and kind of transferring through to our primary pattern, in a respect that, I don't really actually know, but I know it works. Right. Yeah. So,
that's more important. I mean, a lot of times the studies and the scientific backing comes much after people have been doing it and trying it for years. Like your coach in weightlifting, I'm sure he didn't have certain biometric data, but he knew that it worked. He knows what he's doing. Right. So that in a lot of ways, that's more important. So one interesting thing, as far as super speed sticks, overspeed training, stuff like that, I've heard an argument, not necessarily against those, but favoring more where you're actually hitting something. And they equate it to, like in a boxing match, if I miss my punch and I overextend, that lack of impact will put more stress on my body, and I won't quite get the bracing and the impact as if I were hitting something. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there, is a significant benefit, obviously, because ultimately we are hitting something, right? And, just the recognition of impact at max speed. So I think there is some great value in, max speed training. Well, hit it, like with the intent of hitting the object, which we're doing, right? But the super speed as well. People, we are swinging the club, but, we're kind of going after a grander thing in the ability to, to tap into some speed that, we're working at a level that we're not used to working at, right? With the intention of performance elevation. Mm-hmm. And I think, not having the ball to fixate on is actually of benefit as well, where we, can swing freely, swing with as much speed as possible, and without that conscious element of impact. So I see both ends of the argument. I see tremendous benefit in the impact side, where you need to be able to, you have that element of contact and the club head slowing down, and this dissipation of force, and there's all the benefits of that. But I do see, with like the dry swings, but the intention of elevating the neuromuscular system in, not, people will say, oh, your swing, it's not technically good when you're swinging, but what we're going after is something a little deeper. We're going after, kind of this neuromuscular efficiency and trying to elevate performance. Right. So I do see that benefit in not hitting something and not having that, that impetus of, having to make perfect contact. Right. And also that the deceleration impact, like with the super speed, when we hit a golf ball, we don't have to essentially decelerate as aggressively or, as robust as we would if, we're swinging super speed. You have to decelerate that because it's coming through there, the green club at, 160 miles an hour. You have to decelerate that as well. So that's, kind of training our decelerators too, to be a little more efficient, right? So that potentially when we're swinging faster, our body has the recognition to be able to decelerate, a increased a mile per hour swing, and recognize that and tap into some efficiency in the neuromuscular system that way.
Yeah, very interesting. I definitely, I agree. I see value in both. I don't know for myself what has helped more yet, but I'll still be experimenting. So we've talked a lot about the physical side of things, but I would say just as important or more important is the mental side of things. And anybody who's won 6 world championships, I have to talk to them about the mental side of things. So I guess let me start by saying, what would you do leading up to a tournament and in the tournament? Visualization, priming, like what kind of stuff were you into and are you into?
Join us for part 2 as Jason and I discuss the mental game and performance-enhancing drugs in sports.